of the pictures.
Very art. It's kind of art, you know?
And we're live. It is Monday, the 17th of November. It is the year of our Lord 2025. It is 8 o'clock a.m. and I am tempted to do the entire show making no reference to either Holly or my attire, but that seems improbable. Uh, Folks, um, it's Frog Day. I'm not sure why. Holly's not sure why, but we both went to the Million Frog March, which was kind of more like a 8 or 10 frog march on Saturday. And we thought the only rational response of normal human beings to such an event was to show up on the show dressed as frogs. So here we are. I want to say inflatable frog costumes not meant for this application. And so uh, it is, you think it's distracting to look at somebody doing a monologue dressed like this. Try doing a monologue dressed like this. But the sun is shining. The birds are chirping. It is going to be a great fucking day. And Holly is going to take over the monologue today.
Yeah, the cacti are, it's too much to have cactus and frogs. So you're watching Dog Shirt TV, a frogging revolution in morning television.
You are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a riveting revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features is that every now and then Holly wears a frog onesie and
This
I
is
wear an
comfy.
inflatable. What's
You made
that?
this is like legit comfy. I'm lounging around the house in this.
Yeah, well, this is like legit not comfy. Um, it is not bad when you're uh, walking around the mall. But when you're sitting in a chair giving, it's not ideal for this purpose. Um, but that is one of the revolutionary features that occasionally Holly and I will show up on the show both dressed as frogs, um, because democracy. Um, and another
Democracy.
and another one of the revolutionary features, and there are quite a few of them, is that
Okay.
you know, I will commit to the bit for like the first few minutes, the monologue length of the show, but then turn off the inflatability, take my head out, and this can be instead of a dog shirt, a frog bodysuit, kind of like Holly's. Um, all of which is a long-winded way of saying that we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to do frog protests. Holly, why don't you give, for those who did not read your excellent post on the subject this morning, why don't you give a sense of what our weekend experience was?
Yeah, so as everyone is probably aware, the protesters around the country have been wearing frog inflatables and other inflatables, but the frogs seem to have taken off in the pro-democracy protesting space. So a friend at church shared with me that there was going to be a million frog protest at the Lincoln on Saturday and sent me the link, and I did not look at the link, which is look at the links, guys, before you share. And I just assumed it was going to be like calling all inflatables, have a pro democracy protest. So I sent it to Ben and I sent it to my other like crazy friends that I have. I have a whole collection of crazy friends. Some of them are in this chat this morning, probably. Melissa, Dale, and I was like, we have to do this. And then they also were very excited. And without really looking, did you even look at the link, Ben? I don't know. Um, he's lip syncing. I don't read lips, but anyway, he
I did look at it, and I was aware that it was a actual frog protest. I
okay,
think I
but you
I
were still
told you
game.
that. But I
Yeah,
didn't,
I
but I
didn't
sort of
register.
assumed that it was like going to be modestly a frog protest
Yeah, yeah.
with hundreds and hundreds of
Frog. Yeah,
anti-ice protesters
yeah.
there, and it was really more the opposite.
No, it was definitely the opposite. It was, yeah, it was one scientist who really was very enthusiastic about frogs, and a few of his cohorts with little frog literature handing out. And anyway, yeah, there were not many people there. And most of the people that were there were confused, I would say.
Yeah.
I would say they were like me and they thought they didn't, sometimes you hear and see what you want to hear and see. I think the last 10 years of American history has demonstrated this human tendency very clearly. It's called confirmation bias. And so when I get word of a frog protest, I want it to be a, a, a large pro democracy protest. And so that's what I read into the situation. And that's what I went there. And I wasn't alone because there were other confused people there with assorted signs about anti-ice. There were a few people actually there for the frogs, but it was precious few. Most people were just there for other reasons, not having to do with frogs. But I have to say, sitting there, standing there and listening to the scientist, I do feel bad for the frogs now.
All right. I want to say, first of all, I like frogs a lot.
I'm fine with them.
I am all for protecting amphibian ecosystems, and but I have to say that in my list of democratic priorities right now,
Exactly.
like the
Whoa.
amphibians, they're not off of it. It's just that they're not at the top right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And so I did feel mildly misled. Um, and I did think that the length of the lecture about the frogs
Frogs.
was a bit excessive if you're going to lure a bunch of people there on not quite false pretenses, but let's just say slightly misleading pretenses. Maybe you keep the frog stuff brief and you have a frogs plus democracy rally. This seemed like a frog rally with like a bunch of tricked democracy people there.
Yeah, and I was surprised it was so small because I think as Dale said in the chat, like it kind of I think Indivisible kind of actually promoted it, which is, they're the biggies. So if there's Indivisible on something like I think I'm coming out. But anyway, my big takeaway was that among other things, Trump is fucking up the frogs.
Yeah.
And so it shouldn't be surprising because he's fucking up everything else. And I do feel bad for the frogs, but again, like priorities, like there's people being pulled off the street, and there's children in Africa dying, and there's just rampant corruption. And I think the frogs may have to wait.
Okay. But I want to say a few things about full body inflatable frog costumes
Please, please.
because I have now learned a lot about them and having used one now twice, once for, a monologue on a show and once for there on false pretenses frog protest. And these costumes are awesome. They do three things at the same time. One is they are quite inexpensive. This one cost about $40. Number two, they conceal your identity much more than a mask can, because they conceal your height, they conceal your weight, they conceal your face in a 360 kind of way. So,
In fact, I was photographing another frog that I thought was you, and it turned out that that wasn't you.
see, and that person could have been a foot taller than me, and you'd never know. Most people are a foot taller than me. And so that's a cool thing. And then the third is they make whoever you're protesting against look ridiculous. And so these are three accomplishments of the frog costume that I think can be. And so I just want to say, buy yourself one. Don't think too hard about it. Put it on and, don't wear it to work. It's inconvenient for that purpose, but kind of wear it for all your protesting activities. And by the way, it amuses little children. So it's kind of like a win-win-win. So buy
So,
a frog costume.
can I just defend myself in the fact that I did not buy an inflatable?
Yeah, I think you have a good excuse.
Well, I first of all, this is very cute. I just want to like, and it's like it has little mittens. It's very warm and cozy.
This one has mittens too, but they
Okay, well,
look like
these are
this.
cozy, soft mittens. And it has, if you have a long torso like I have, don't worry because the crotch is literally down at your knees. Like you're not, you're gonna fit in it. And there's plenty of room for Thanksgiving pies and other items. The frog people were giving out these little things. I don't know what they are for, but I put it on my zipper. It's a little frog like attach it to my zipper for an additional, cool detail you see there. Um, it has a hood. It's very warm. It's a good winter protest thing to have. It's a good just lounging around the house thing to have. So this is a great costume, about the same price, I will say. But the reason I did not go full on inflatable is because I have personally witnessed someone wiping out in an inflatable, and I
Street.
no, this is what happened, Ben, and I didn't detail this full story in the post because it was too long, but I'll do a brief version. So we held a surprise 50th birthday party about 10 years ago for a very good friend of mine, and his mother, his elderly mother, like 80 something year old mother and sister flew in unbeknownst to him, and he loves Star Wars, so they put on Star Wars outfits so he wouldn't know it was them, and then at a certain moment they were going to reveal who they were at the party. So the 80-year-old woman put on an inflatable Jabba the Hutt and then proceeded to fall down my stairs in it.
Whoa.
And yes, we were terrified. We thought she had broken something. And then my friend had no idea it was his mother. So he was just like, oh, or he was not all that. And we were flipping out. And then we tried to reveal, like, take her off her hood and, like, get her out of it. And she was like, no, you're ruining the surprise. I was like, I think it's time to. Anyway, she was fine. But having that in my memory and then having recently thrown out my back and just knowing myself, I just feared that some calamity would befall me in this costume. And so I thought it was too dangerous for me to wear.
Well, I think that first of all, there is no obligation to the inflatable, and I will say for lounging around the house purposes, the snuggly kind of terry cloth bathrobe frog costume is definitely superior to this. So I think, which frog costume you go for is going to be your own choice. And we don't judge, what we don't yuck other people's yum. And so whichever one is going to do it for you is going to be the thing. I do want to address John Hawkinson's question about weather issues in inflatable costumes.
Yeah, you could
Um,
rain in that. That's like a rainproof thing, right?
yeah, so it is actually surprising how warm it keeps you. And the reason is that, human body heat is a wonderful thing and it tends to warm a pocket of air around it. I would not wear it in frigid New England temperatures without, some other jacket, but I was in it um, in short sleeves and light pants, and it kept me just fine. In fact, I was just this side of uh, uncomfortably warm. And I think if it's above freezing, you're going to be just fine in an inflatable without additional, whatever your street clothes are, plus the inflatable is going to be fine. Which raises the question, of course, whether we should be considering it as a regular jacket for cold weather. And I think the answer to that question is no, because it is bulky, and probably not the most efficient way to keep yourself warm. But look, I'm not, gonna criticize other people's sartorial choices.
This is it. These costumes are definitely problematic for summer protesting. This would be really unbearable. I assume that would also be rather warm in summer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So, yeah, I think. Oh, one question I had was the recycled air that you were presumably breathing for the length of time you had it on there. Could you smell your own breath? Like, was it became? I hope you brushed your teeth very well beforehand,
It
but
was an issue. As a general matter, you begin to, um, you know, exist in the fetid swamp of your own body sweat and breath.
the
And
swamp where the
yeah,
frogs
and
live.
well, we want to drain the swamp. And so, yeah, I would not recommend it as loungewear if that's what you're asking. And I
I just
really
wondered
wouldn't.
how long, like it's comfortable and not oppressive to wear without passing out from the garlic that you ate for lunch or whatever.
I would say as long as I mean, you do have a recirculating, um, uh, the fan that compressor does keep it a certain amount of recirculation going, but it's not, look, this is not what the thing to wear if you're trying to impress yourself with your, with your
Dental
odor.
hygiene.
Yeah, or I mean, it's not even so much dental as full body. You
Yeah.
do smell every pore of sweat
Oh,
that
yeah.
you've
So take a
got.
shower, but then you're gonna probably get sweaty and it's just that's a good consideration, you know?
Yeah, I think that's all going to argue in favor of the fuzzy terry cloth one.
There's not many arguments against this except it is warm and I would think certainly above, 65, I think you'd be pretty hot in this.
Yeah,
Um, the other nice thing about this versus yours was I was able to actually hop. Melissa
I
took,
didn't try.
I was able to actually hop like a frog.
Yeah.
Melissa took some pictures. I don't know that she took any video, but I hopped part of the way like a frog, which was fun. So
So, Holly, we have squandered 18 minutes of the show on this subject.
talking.
What is on your mind this morning?
Oh my gosh, not a whole lot because this basically took up my entire weekend. But I am going to Salt Lake City tomorrow for a Principles First event that I'm actually on the panel, which is very weird. I'm on a panel on religious freedom with, among other people, John Kasich, who
I'd forgotten about him.
I know, right?
What
I
is he
act
up to these days?
well, we'll find out. Going to Principles First panels. So I actually, in 2016, 2015, 2016, I thought he was the only, I voted for him in the primary. He was literally the only, well, I guess
You,
Jeb. I would have been fine with Jeb. But then Jeb dropped out. John Kasich lasted longer than Jeb.
yeah,
So
well, he lasted all the way through,
it was
um,
him and Ted Cruz
right.
and Trump. and I certainly wasn't going to go with Ted Cruz. So I pinned all my hopes on John Kasich, and clearly that did not work out. But
And
yeah,
now you're going to be on a panel with him.
yeah, my we'll see how that goes. I hope I don't humiliate myself. But is
I don't think
anyone?
you're going to humiliate yourself. I think there's a chance that you will not get a word in edgewise because John Kasich does not really like it when other people are speaking.
Yes, I
Um,
think he's the going to be the star, and then the other panelists are the. So I don't. Yeah, we'll see if I get to say anything.
so when is that?
It is Wednesday night. There's
Wow.
still tickets, so if
So
you
if
live
you
in
happen to be in
Utah
Salt Lake City,
or Utah,
do we have
um,
any, if there are any Greek chorus members in Salt Lake City, this is the time to show your head and your face and ribbit because Holly should know you exist.
yeah.
Holly, I want to say it is hard to overstate how ridiculous you look right now.
Well, so you're saying I shouldn't wear this to the principal's first
Well,
event?
let's just say mad respect if you did.
I don't think that like if I were George Conway of that sort of stature, I would totally wear a frog. And George Conway should wear a frog costume or you could pull it off actually, Ben. But people are already like wondering who I am and and so I don't think I'm of the stature to pull it off.
So I think the coolest thing would be if there were an inflatable that was just like a guy in a business suit and
Yes.
you walk on as a guy with a business suit, deflate yourself, take off the suit, and underneath there is a guy in a dog shirt.
Yeah. So I think there's a time and a place. And this is probably not it. So I'm not going to do that. So, no, so I'm doing that. Yeah, I don't have like a whole lot of news except Russians are tricking my Kenyans into going to Russia to fight for them, and
Yeah, so what's that
I
about?
don't appreciate that at all.
How did a bunch of Kenyans end up fighting for Russia?
Well, there and I learned I read a couple of Africa related or Kenya related articles this weekend that troubled me greatly. But that was one of them that the which we had known there had been previous articles on a few assorted Kenyans, but nationals from other countries showing up on the front lines of the Ukraine war. But apparently, this is part of a really concerted campaign by the Russians, and the Kenyan authorities actually rescued 21 people a few days ago that were heading out to do that. So with in poor countries where unemployment is high and opportunities are scarce, going overseas, there's all kinds of unscrupulous actors offering job contracts. The Middle East is a particularly awful destination, particularly for women.
But
They'll
are these a situation where like Kenyans are being approached and people say, "Hey, do you want to go fight in Ukraine?"
no, no.
Or are they being recruited to do other work and
Yes.
then sort of impressed into the
Yes. No,
military?
that's what it is. Yeah. No, the stories are really sad. Like they think that they're going for some other job opportunity, and then they get there and they're basically forced to go to the front line. So it's really, really evil and diabolical. They do this also, various Middle Eastern countries recruit labor in Kenya, but then they get, especially women, but then they get to Emirates or wherever they're going, Qatar, and then they're basically treated like slaves. It's really bad. And apparently, there are companies that the Kenyan president and other officials in the government have stakes in these labor recruiting companies. that do this for middle in the Middle East. And so the Kenyan president himself, I just read an article about this, which I had no idea this was happening, where he's a stakeholder in one of these companies and making a ton of money off of recruiting labor for these terrible, in these terrible conditions. A lot of it times it's women, and they're then basically become sex slaves, among other things. So it's a huge problem in Africa, but it is just, I mean, as if I could hate Russia anymore, you know? I mean,
The Kenyan government is, I take it, participating in this because people are being paid off, or
so that's two separate things. They're participating in the Middle Eastern recruiting thing. That's a long-standing employment pipeline. And some of it is legitimate employment, but in general, they are not treated well once they
right.
arrive. I mean,
Even the legitimate employment involves pretty abusive conditions.
yes, and poor and low pay and difficulty to get out. Once you're there, like it's difficult to break the contract or whatever you've
That's
signed. And
probably true of, if you ever fly Emirates, you see uh, beautiful flight attendants from all over the world, and they live in these dorms in Doha, sorry, in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, where people are, they're monitored 24/7. I mean, it's a real shit show.
yeah, it's not good. It's really, really not good. I have even known cases of unofficially, but there have been cases here in the U.S. of Middle Eastern, and I'm sorry to pick on the middle, but it's just true that they are. It's always Middle Eastern, almost always. But even diplomats here will have basically slaves working in their house that they don't pay, and it's a terrible, and often they're Africans. It's a terrible situation. So the Russians have sort of tapped into this established, demand for employment, and yeah, have tricked 200 Kenyans. It says, according to the BBC. Um, and got them to Russia, and then some of them end up in the front lines. Some of those, here's a quote from the article. Some of those who've been rescued say they were forced to assemble drones and handle chemicals without proper training or protective gear. Others of them have been sent to the conflict zone. About 1,400 citizens from across Africa are fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. Some of them may
And
be.
should our assumption be that none of them are voluntary and
No,
or
some of
that
them are
some of them
probably
are?
voluntary. Yeah, some of them are probably voluntary, um, but they're promised a large amount of money. They're that may or that usually doesn't come through. And yeah, I think even the ones that know they're going to fight are promised more money than they actually. They're not completely honest with them, and there is deception involved.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, it's really, really awful and diabolical, and so that made me angry. And then also the article about Kenyan officials, including the president, having stakes in these employment companies that are sending workers to work in horrible conditions in the Middle East. That made me really angry. I can't say that I'm surprised because Kenyan politicians are notoriously corrupt and make find ways to make lots of money off their positions. That's a long-standing issue. But it made me angry. And then, yeah, I didn't actually read it because it's so triggering, but their Bulwark had an article, an interview with Atul Gawande, the former head of USAID, about the impact in Africa on of USAID cuts. I can't even read those articles anymore because they're so upsetting. So that made me super angry. But I think the death toll is up to like 600,000, most of them children. And
And these are mostly HIV or mostly
there's starvation, like even established refugee camps are short of food. Um,
gotcha.
and anyway, it's just there's a lot of abuse of poor people, poor vulnerable people who have few opportunities and prospects, and in some cases food and medicine. And there's pretty much nothing that makes me more angry in the world than the exploitation and abuse of such people. So
So does it seem like an appropriate response to put on a frog costume and go down to the mall?
yeah.
I mean, because I gotta say, that feels like the only rational response. It's nonviolent. Um, but it also feels, maybe like it's a little bit mild, particularly if you end up.
And I'm sitting here talking about this in a frog costume. I realize that. And I don't mean to make light of the situation because it actually is, it's frogging, enraging. Um, and but what can you do other than wear a frog costume? I
Right.
don't know
I
what
know.
you can do.
I want to advance the modest proposition that it is actually the rational response that um, that when you show up on the mall with a frog costume, you are sending a message that the world is absurd and unjust, and all we can do is mock it. Um, and um, and I'm open to other alternative ideas like, world revolution but they don't seem to work well. And so I'm just tempted by okay,
You know what
you've
I
left
do
us
want to
no
do?
choice. We're putting on frog costumes and, walking in front of the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument.
You know what I do want to do though is I want to start just when I have some free time, I want to start standing outside of JD Vance's house in the frog costumes with like scripture verses on placards. Um, because he
Which scripture verse is it? Only the Exodus 8:2
no, no,
or
no, 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 not frog related. Just shame. He doesn't. He says he's a Christian, and yet he is, um, basically, yeah, he's basically trampling on the Christian teachings on a daily basis, and also he knows better. So, I think your friend, I went to the book talk of Laura Field with Ben last night, which was excellent. We've had her on this show. Anyway, according to her analysis, J.D. Vance is kind of a true believer, these sort of Catholic integralist things. But I think more cynical than that. I think he totally knows better, and he's just using all of this to get ahead. And it makes me super mad. Like he pisses me off big time. So I would be interested in that, just like just hanging out outside his residence when when does he commute? Like I need to research like what time he leaves um the his residence in the morning, and I presume he goes down Mass Ave. Do they use that Mass
yeah, no, I mean, I get stuck in that traffic jam regularly,
Yeah.
because when, they seal off all of Mass Ave for several minutes every time he leaves the building if he does it by car.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so, but it's not on a schedule for obvious reasons, and so I think you have to take your chances.
Yeah. Anyway, again, does it do any good? No, it doesn't do good. But it makes you feel like you're doing something, you're doing something. So I have thought about that. I have to say, yeah, like all of this, especially the USA stuff, I think it enrages me particularly for a number of reasons. One being that it is truly evil. I think, and the fact that a billionaire, almost trillionaire, is the one that orchestrated all of this is like particularly obscene.
I
That
liked Bill Gates's comment about it.
what did he say?
He said there's something ugly about the richest man in the world starving the poorest people in the world.
I mean, it's just obscene. I think that's all it's definitely that's what it is. So anyway, so that is enraging just on his face, but then the fact that, you know, this is affecting a region of the world that I know and love well, that I've seen the impact and the, distribution of this aid like close up over the course of my whole life, that I, have personally here have friends working in these sort of sectors, etc. That is enraging. But then also the fact that, again, 80% of white evangelicals, they don't think they voted for this, but they voted for this, and they don't have a whole lot to say, frankly.
Yeah,
That pisses me off.
so let's talk about that for a minute. Has there been any evangelical discourse about the USAID cuts?
In the sort of elite Christianity Today, Russell Moore, David French circles, yes, they've been very clear on this, but they don't. Again,
Yeah, but they're all renegades.
The Christianity Today is like
David
the
French's politics are increasingly more like mine than like his cohort. So I don't. I mean, in the in the mainstream, so to speak, of that community, is it even being addressed?
Oh, I mean, just look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is apparently winning new friends now by urging the release of the Epstein files. Okay, so good for
Right.
her on that. And she's being attacked by the president and his allies. She's also, very good evangelical, but she has had nothing to say. In fact, she's doubling down on the America First stuff, she says Trump is not doing enough America First because he's giving money to places like Argentina and things like that, and starting wars with Venezuela and things like that. So she has nothing to say. I people who I know personally who know better, who again lived in Africa. I'm not going to mention any names. Who are Trump supporters, have nothing to say about this. And in fact, I've seen some of them spread the stupid propaganda that all USAID was doing was lighting up cash and promoting LGBTQ agenda and not doing actually anything useful. And I'm like, you know better than that. Like that's a lie. Like you know better than that. And it makes me very angry. So, Richard.
Richard, what's on your mind
Hello.
this morning?
Well, I thought this would be a good day to bring this up since Holly is also on. Um, I um, I think that we need to rehabilitate the concept of the fool. So, and I don't mean Shakespeare's fool. I mean like fools as you find them in the Bible, where um, It, and the reason I say this is I hear people talk so much about that and such is an idiot. And, that's kind of our go-to term for what we really mean by someone who is a fool, who who has nothing but contempt for expertise, wisdom, all these sorts of things. And so, I hear idiot this, idiot that, idiot that. The problem is that, you can talk in terms of intelligence all you want, but there are, you know, Ted Cruz is not an idiot. He's a fool.
Yes, yes.
Um,
Good, Richard.
We need some definitions here, John Hawkinson tells us. Uh, so, how are we distinguishing between idiocy and foolishness?
well, I think uh, idiocy. Idiocy, I think, although in common usage, we tend to, um, wait a minute, let's go the other way. So idiocy, you know, means a lack of intelligence. People who are, you can't help idiocy. Um, and idiocy is not, I mean, idiocy, a lack of intelligence is not, in itself a bad thing. But being a fool, someone who spurns, someone who knows better, and spurns, wisdom, spurns, uh, again, expertise, knowledge, all these things. Uh, that that just that's a that's the moral category.
Yeah, yeah, agreed.
Idiot is not a moral category.
Yeah. It's although it's not helpful in a society en masse,
And, and when you say fool in this sense, um, what is the prototype that you're thinking of? Is it um, uh, um, the kings who do not listen to prophets? Is it um, who is your prototype of the fool?
Oh,
I have specific people in mind in my
well, yeah, I have people in mind. I mean, yes, it could be kings not listening to prophets. It could
You mean
also
Ted Cruz
be,
is a fool? Marco Rubio is
yeah,
a fool.
right.
Right, no, but these are contemporary examples.
Well,
Um,
um, or if you look, for example, at Proverbs, where we have these young men who live dissolute lives, and they're going towards destruction because um, they spurn wisdom, they spurn, uh, yeah, like Kate just posted it in the chat. Fool despises wisdom and instruction. Um, uh, I guess that's the kind of person I think of as a fool. And a lot of times, a lot of people are going to say idiot or moron, but I don't think that's what they mean. And the problem, JD Vance is a smart guy.
Yeah.
Um, and um, it doesn't help for people to run around saying, JD Vance is an idiot, because that's not a moral category. But a fool, that unfortunately it's a term that has lost its moral force, or its
well, it had, by the
stigmatizing
time of
force.
Shakespeare, it had lost its um, the moral force in the sense that you're using it, because
Yeah,
Shakespeare uses fool to mean a jester who actually is very wise.
that's true. That's true. That is, yeah. Lear's fool is the um, sort of the conscience of the play. Um,
At least vis-a-vis Lear.
yeah, vis-a-vis
Um,
Lear.
so I'm hung up on. It's an interesting question that I don't know the answer to. Maybe if Lior is here, he does. What the Hebrew word is that gets translated in King James as fool. I will have to look that up.
Yeah,
And um, what, and it would be interesting if Lior is looking it up, and what the connotations of that word are um, uh, um, in biblical Hebrew.
There's a lot of Kate is and others have indicated that there's a lot of definitions involving silly, and I don't think that is what Richard is talking about. Like, to me, a silly person is, I guess it could be silly. Like, when I think of silly person, I think of someone who sits on a show in a frog costume, and I tend to like silly people. But if you're silly in in how you judge, in your lack of wisdom. I guess that could also be silly, but I tend to think of silly as like a frivolous or just a kind of a ridiculous person, and that could go in different ways. I think what Richard's talking about is a moral designation, which I would agree with. Someone who is just allows themselves to be misled or basically just chooses an unwise, immoral path, like just deliberately, for some other end.
So it's a very interesting. So Kate is flagging the word Casil, which actually I don't know. And so I am going to. So one thing about uh, Hebrew words is that biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew often have quite different connotations, although the roots will mean the same thing. Um, yeah, so Lior says Kasil is more like stupid. Um, when I think of stupid in modern Hebrew, I think of tipesh. And so I'm not sure um, what the um, what the connotational difference is. Um, yeah, and Lior says yes, it's like tipesh. Um, so I um, uh, you know, if you think about different figures of foolishness in the Hebrew Bible, so um, uh, King Ahasuerus from the book of Esther is stupid, easily misled, but he's not um, but he's not foolish in the sense that Richard means. It's not in a it doesn't have a uh, um, it doesn't have that connotation. Um, Fred is absolutely right that the language that is super rich in words for foolishness is Yiddish. And but my Yiddish is not remotely good enough to run through them. But these have there are varieties of them that have just shades of different connotations. There's a whole, uh, lexicon of words implying, there's also a bunch of words implying different types of sort of failures in life or fuck ups. Nebish, Shlemiel, right? Shlemazel. These are um, uh, but these are not the biblical sense of foolishness, right? These are more like unworldly in different senses. Shmagegi Potts. No, not schmuck, Fred. Schmuck is more a genital reference,
Oh,
as is putz actually. And But definitely Schmagegi. Um, and so I uh
There's, I guess, I think we're kind of losing my larger point, though. I think, or the larger point that maybe I haven't made yet, which is that I think that we need what we're lacking in public discourse, I think, and although it's probably available to us, is a way of distinguishing people um, who are intelligent and act badly from uh, a way of calling people out who are intelligent but act badly that recognizes both the intelligence and the mendacity. And when we say fool, that doesn't. I mean, when we say idiot or moron, that doesn't convey that.
right, so
And
the word that we used to have for this in modern English, which we've gotten rid of, I think, is moral idiot. Which I always kind of liked. The moral idiot being the person who, though intelligent, makes uh, willfully willfully bad choices on a regular basis, right? Is morally stupid. Um, I It's interesting that we don't have a good simple word for that. That doesn't have a. I agree with you that it by Shakespearean times, the word fool plays that role in the King James Bible sometimes, but it also but it also plays that it also plays sometimes the opposite role, including in Shakespeare. Um,
I
it's interesting that we don't have a word for that. Maybe we need a coinage.
I
You
just
know,
think,
oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, I just think this whole I think fool to me does the trick. Certainly if you have any grounding in scripture, Jewish or Christian scripture, you know, it's all in there, like you said. But to me, this whole Trump episode um, underscores the difference between, you know, in a religious sense, sort of doctrine and wisdom, and the idea that evangelicals have been obsessed with their doctrine and getting the correct doctrine, and they this like literalist view of the Bible, which is sort of a paint by numbers, you know, type of morality. And I really think that that has been their undoing in this, and all of our undoing, because when it comes down to it and discernment is actually required, they've completely failed the moral test as a culture. They don't they actually are, it's a foolish culture, Richard, I would say, in that they have not, their view of the scripture, their view of faith is has long been overly simplistic, elementary, again, like paint by numbers, not based on critical thought. And then when the test comes, they fail because they can't extrapolate a larger sense of ethics and wisdom from it. And I just think so. It's very ironic. Like I grew up being, you know, they various pockets of evangelicalism are obsessed with the end times, you know, and like, oh, you know, the antichrist is going to appear, and like we've got to be able to recognize the antichrist, or we're all going to, you know, fail the test. There's like this big test coming, and you know, you we can't fail the test, and it's like I don't believe in a singular antichrist anymore, but I certainly believe in the spirit of antichrist, and that is what we have now. And they've literally all, not all of them, but 80% of them have thrown in with the Antichrist.
All right, so
It's very ironic.
I want to link this to an obsession of mine before giving John Hawkinson the last word today, which is the I think this links to the AI fixation that we are obsessed with uh, um, artificial intelligence as opposed to artificial any other value. For example, there's no artificial wisdom industry. There's no artificial kindness industry. There's no like teaching computers to make um, uh, like artificial prudence. Um, you know, we have elevated intelligence in the very limited sense of the ability to think through a particular, you know, category of problem that maybe appears on the waste or on a but like there's a million values you could be spending 100 gazillion dollars to train computers to maximize. And it seems to me deeply linked to Richard's point that we are training computers to uh, be like Ted Cruz, right? Smart, but not wise. Smart, but unable to distinguish between good ideas from bad ideas, merely executing on uh, problems. And it seems to me we're overvaluing intelligence relative to wisdom in a pretty systemic way. All right, John, that's my dressed as a frog provocation of the morning.
I think that's a little too cute, Ben. You know, we talk about artificial intelligence because we don't know how to create it, real intelligence. And we don't have quite the same problems with prudence and wisdom, although we have related ones. I think it is fair to say we have spent more time trying to make computers respond to and figure out how to do things, and that the things we have figured out have not focused on wisdom and intelligence or wisdom and prudence. However, from the view of computer science, uh, wisdom and prudence are essentially subcategories of intelligence. And
That's
so,
exactly my point.
but they're not
Wi- So
subcategories of intelligence in human
wisdom
parlance.
is in fact not a subcategory of intelligence.
Right, but you can't
Um,
create a computer that's wise without creating a computer that understands how to understand speech.
you,
Or you can't, or the mechanisms by which we create artificial intelligence uh, are prerequisites for creating things like artificial prudence and wisdom, unless we're merely talking about giving a computer some clear rules that you express in programming language code, rather than the way we express artificial intelligence. So
so
there's
I
definitional
actually
mismatch.
don't agree with this. I
Okay.
think I think um, if we started with the goal of helping people make wiser decisions, the AI industry would look completely different than
I
it
don't
does.
disagree. That's
For
true.
example, the idea that you would be feeding large numbers of people hallucinatory text because the cost of false information is lower than the cost of non-information, you would actually have a very serious conversation about whether any of that was true. And the the privileging of the ability to execute tasks rather than to slow down and decide whether a given execution is worth doing, that is a moral choice. It is not a derivative function of AI. It's a choice that let's see if we can get it to do X,
Let,
rather than let's see if we can get it to help us question whether doing X is a good idea in the
let
first
me
place.
phrase my concern a little differently. I think you're suggesting, instead of training computers with large data sets of everything, we would train them with more targeted data sets that would give answers that were smarter or better or more prudent or more morally conscious. And what I'm saying is the very process of taking a large data set and training a computer on that data set is what we call in computer science artificial intelligence. So if your beef is with what shall you train it, then uh, that is not about artificial intelligence. This gets complicated.
No,
I wanted to raise the
again, I think you're missing my point. My point is antecedent to training or to whether the language model is, scraped from all of human uh, production or whether it's something else. My point is that just as Richard is asking, um, uh, why is it that all these smart people are so morally dumb? Um, I'm asking the question, why is the ambition to train computers to be intellectually capable rather than to exercise sound judgment. And I'm not disagreeing with your point that these two are connected, that there is an underlying skill set that involves both. But I do think when you're always asking the capabilities question and you're never asking the judgment question, you're missing something very profound. And it's exactly the point that Richard is making about about JD Vance, which is how can a guy who's clearly this capable make all the wrong decisions on such a consistent basis? It is now 9 o'clock, which means we are going to end here. I'm going to give John the last word because that's the kind of guy I am, but it's going to have to be quick, John.
All right, thanks, Ben. I was going to suggest that perhaps how we think about the questions of fools and whether we are all fools or largely fools in our modern country relates to the language we use. And the fact that we don't have 10 words for fool might suggest that other languages in other countries might be able to do better, or that we are doing worse because of our language. I think this is not borne out by the data. It doesn't seem like Germany is doing all that much better than we are. So I think the theory is flawed, and I don't know why, and please discuss.
We will be back. We will discuss more. I think we have a guest tomorrow. But this is a subject that is not going away, and we will discuss it further in days, weeks, months, and I'm sure years to come.